I bought a car that was pushing over 300 horsepower until something went seriously wrong. And today we're going to find out what. By the time I got this car, someone had already started taking this engine apart, which usually means something went pretty wrong. I usually work on Volvos and I've always had a thing for turbocharged 5-cylinder engines, so a Ford Focus ST was kind of inevitable. This one's been pushed to 309 horsepower, right up until the engine gave up. And that's exactly where this story starts. For most people, a blown engine means the end of the story, but for me that's where it gets interesting. So let's take this ST to my garage and get to work. Now I'm really hoping we don't scrape the bumper when loading this car. To try and avoid scraping the bumper, we first laid down some tiles in front of the trailer. And because the car is pretty low, we added some wood as well. But even that still wasn't enough. And it turns out we'll have to remove the bumper after all. This should be pretty straightforward. We just had to remove the grille and the headlights first to get to the bolts on the bumper itself. And with the bumper finally off, loading the car should have been easy, but apparently this Focus still wasn't planning to cooperate. Well, you guessed it, that took way longer than expected because as you can see it's already dark, but let's get this thing home. And we're here, and now that this car's in the garage, let's take a look at what we're dealing with. We bought this Focus from the previous owner who was still driving it when the oil pressure light came on. He shut the car off straight away, or at least that's what he told us. The car then went to a garage where they removed the oil sump and suspected something went wrong in the bottom end of the engine. And with these engines making over 300 horsepower, there was also a small chance the damage could be a lot worse than just worn conrod bearings. But we haven't seen it ourselves yet, and considering it's been sitting for months without an oil sump, we honestly don't know what we're going to find inside. But there's only one way to find out, and that's pulling the engine out. Pink. Pretty. With the hood off and all the fluids drained, it's finally time to start getting the engine out. But before we can get anywhere near lifting it out, a lot of other parts have to come off first. Now, we've never worked on a car like this before, so we're probably removing more parts than necessary, but we're going to remove this cover so we have a bit more room to just take a look what else we have to remove. So it's probably not necessary, but we're going to do it anyway. Of course, removing that panel isn't quite as simple as just taking the panel itself off, because the wipers have to come out first as well. And since Pascal and I somehow managed to turn every one-person job into a two-person job, we decided to tackle that together first.
What do you think this pipe is for that's just hanging here?
I have no clue. I think it's for a vacuum cleaner. I've never seen this before, do you know?
Yeah, it's a funny story because it's only on the Ford. It's made to get the noise from the engine bay in the car, so you get an extra sporty feel.
Oh, that's pretty cool. I've never seen this before.
Yeah,
I've heard that before now that you say it though.
On the ST and on the Eras. I know I never saw it, but I know it's there for, so
Cool.
Funny fact.
And after Pascal's quick lesson about Ford engineering, we can finally remove the panel we've been working towards. Even though we now have access to the back of the engine, I somehow immediately moved back to the front of the engine bay again. Pascal and I usually work in a pretty chaotic way, but because we've worked together so much, it somehow always works out in the end. At this point, we're mostly just trying to remove everything that's either connected to the engine or simply blocking access to it. Usually we try to start with things like hoses and coolant lines first, before moving on to the wiring itself. Although, as you can probably tell by now, we're not exactly following a strict order here. Okay, so we wanted to pull the wiring harness along with the engine, but now that we're looking at it, we think it's easier to leave the wiring harness with the car. So we're going to disconnect all of the wiring from the engine before we pull it. And with our change of plans, the last connector I disconnected can immediately go back into place again. So instead, I start working my way through the wiring on the top side of the engine first, before slowly making my way down. And while I work on the wiring harness, Pascal removes the intake, revealing something pretty disturbing. No, but looking at all those metal flakes, something went seriously wrong with this engine.
No.
Oh, I think that's broken.
Yeah, okay.
Hear that sound? It's satisfying. Yeah, also these springs that you hear. Now that we've seen all those metal flakes in the oil filter housing, I'm even more nervous about what we're going to find once we actually get to look inside this engine. But we're still not there yet, because there are a lot of wires left to disconnect. And compared to our previous project car, this Focus suddenly feels very modern, considering the Beetle only had about 5 wires going to the engine in total. But the more I look at this engine, the more I want to clean it, because it's turned all white and stuff. Now,
Yeah, use that thing we used before.
Yeah, because like last time I did an engine, well not last time, but I did the CRX engine, and people on YouTube told me that I could clean this white stuff with cleaning vinegar.
Yeah,
But
that was the best idea.
You kept having that gag reflex, but I do want to try again, because it did turn out really nice.
Yeah, but what you say is good, you know. You want to try it again, so I'm going.
Yeah, yeah, because it's smelly, but this is so dirty. I really want to clean it.
Yeah.
Before it goes back in, we have to clean it.
Yeah, it is dirty.
Yeah.
So while we're at it, I think we should also replace this engine mount here, because come take a look. This is pretty leaky.
But before we can remove that very leaky engine mount, there are still a few more things left to disconnect first. Now, aside from the drive shafts, we have disconnected everything, so we could pull this engine, almost. But we're not going to do that, because for those of you that have watched a few projects ago, I did a 2.5T Volvo engine, and it was so hard to undo the cylinder head bolts when the engine was out of the car. So we're going to remove all of this for now, and then we can loosen them just a bit, and then we're going to pull this engine. So I think that will be a better idea. So let's do that. And before we can get anywhere near the cylinder head bolts, parts like the cam cover and camshafts had to come off first. So I start by removing the ignition coils, which is where I also find out the spark plugs have been already removed by the previous owner. But that's not really a problem, cause this engine is getting rebuilt with all new parts anyway. Now, of course, this isn't how we'd normally remove a timing belt, but since the engine's coming fully apart anyway, cutting it is just the easiest way to separate it from the cylinder head for now. Quick little trick I've learned from working on Volvos: when removing the cam cover, you can carefully place a medium-sized ratchet between the cylinder head and the cover itself and slowly twist it to break it loose before gently tapping it further with a hammer. And after that we can finally remove the cam cover from this Ford engine. Although, judging by the inside of this cover, Volvo might disagree. Well, it does look like we'll be rebuilding a diesel, doesn't it?
Yes, it's a bit black.
This is bad.
Yeah, it's probably due to the fact that in his previous life, or with his previous owners, they were not so fond of doing oil changes, or they drove little
Small distances.
small distances, right?
Yeah.
They couldn't.
Well, I'm curious what we'll find inside of the engine, because
Yeah, but
this already makes me sad. Even though this is fixable, but
Yeah,
it makes me sad.
yeah, yeah.
So the first thing we see after opening up this engine is thick black sludge everywhere. And honestly, that doesn't exactly give me a lot of confidence for what's waiting deeper inside. Well, I'm really glad I'm doing it with the engine still in the car, because like you can see, it's impossible to do this with the engine loose. And now that I got this super nasty cam cover off, I'm going to let it soak so that at the end of the day it will be clean. This is actually how I always clean engine components like these, such as a cylinder head and a cam cover. I always put some cleaning solution on there and then some cooking water, and then I let it soak for a day. And I use this, how do you even call this, to get most of the dirt off. And it always works perfectly, and it will look like new at the end of the day. And while I'm cleaning the cam cover, Pascal starts working on removing the drive shafts. We'd heard you normally need some special tool to make the job easier, but we decided to try it first with a metal pipe and a hammer instead, which somehow works perfectly fine as well. Yeah, easy. And since we're planning on dropping the engine out from underneath the car instead of pulling it through the top, most of the parts hanging low in the engine bay have to come off as well.
Okay, so we thought we were there, but I cannot flex this enough to keep it there so we can let the engine down. So I'm afraid I gotta loosen up this hose here, so I gotta do that.
Okay, I think we're 90% there, but there's one more thing to do before we pull the engine, and that's to put the oil sump back on, because of course we can't put it on the floor like so. Now, of course, the oil sump only needs to be there so the engine actually has something to stand on once it's out of the car. So I'm definitely not fully reinstalling it. Which honestly is perfectly fine by me, because putting back all those tiny oil sump bolts is not exactly the most exciting job in the world. And after that, it's finally time for the part we've been working towards all day, and that's actually getting the engine out of this car. Before lowering the engine out of the car, we first lift it slightly so we can put something underneath instead of dropping it straight onto the floor. Wood seems to be the safest option to avoid damaging anything, although the pieces we have lying around do need a little bit of customizing first. Our biggest concern is the engine tilting while we lift the car up, so it takes quite a bit of trying, wiggling and repositioning before everything finally sits right. We also normally pull engines out through the top of the engine bay, so for us this is mostly just a matter of trial and error. But after a while, we finally managed to get it out. Engine's out and now ready to be disassembled, but before we do that, there's something else I really want to do first ever since we picked up this car, and that's to finally wash it. So we're going to push it outside and give it a little wash. But before we can push the car outside for its first proper wash, we first have to make it rollable again. So that means reinstalling the wheels now that the engine and gearbox are finally out of the car. Meanwhile, Pascal seems to have found his own way of staying entertained. At this point, we're mainly washing the car so we can finally clean the engine bay properly now that there's no engine in the way anymore. Which also means removing some of the excess wiring first. The wiring that's staying in the engine bay gets covered up with plastic just to keep the water out while we clean everything. At this point, the Focus is finally starting to feel a little more like an actual project again and a little less like a broken car that's been sitting around for months. Even though the engine's completely out, parts are scattered all over the garage and we still don't fully know how bad the damage is inside of the engine. It already feels good finally cleaning everything up a bit, and honestly, now that the engine bay is empty, this is probably the best chance we'll ever get to properly clean all of this before the rebuild starts. Plus, after spending pretty much the entire day taking things apart, it's actually pretty satisfying finally making the car look a little better again instead of worse. And with the car all nice and clean, it is finally time for the most exciting part of this weekend, and that's to finally disassemble this engine so we can see what's going on inside. And I'm really hoping it's just the conrod bearings and not the short block itself, because it can be cracked. But yeah, let's disassemble it so we can see what's going on. The first thing I remove are the valve tappets. And since these need to go back into the exact same position later on during reassembly, I start by marking every single one of them before taking them out. At this point, we're finally getting deeper into the engine itself, and honestly, I'm getting more and more curious what we're going to find once we reach the bottom end. And with the valve tappets out of the way, I continue by removing the exhaust manifold. But before that can come off, all of the turbo lines connected to it have to be removed first, which, as expected, turns into a whole lot of loosening hoses and bolts in awkward places. After removing the exhaust manifold, I first removed the timing belt cover. And behind that, there's this big bracket mounted to the cylinder head that needs to come off too. And last but definitely not least, it's time for the intake manifold, which comes with some pretty annoying to reach bolts of its own. Well, I think it's almost time for the moment of truth, and I'm a bit nervous.
Actually, I'm dying to see what's underneath, because you know what the guy said is something about a thing with
Conrod bearings.
Yeah, right.
But I don't know.
No, I don't know either.
With over 300 horsepower?
Yeah, I don't know. I hope for the best, but we will see.
Yeah, hopefully it's not cracked, but let's loosen those cylinder head bolts.
Yep.
With these engines, making more power also comes with a risk, because once tuned, they're known for cracking cylinder walls. So this is honestly the moment we've been most nervous about all weekend, because if the short block turns out to be cracked, this rebuild could end before it can even properly start. Well, so far so good. The short block isn't cracked, so I'm really happy about that. Everything does look really nice. You can even still see the honing lines until the top of the cylinder. There's only one weird thing, and that's those two lines on piston number 3. But it looks like the piston has gone up too far, because you can see the same lines on the cylinder head. So it looks like the piston has touch the cylinder head, so I think that indicates really bad Conrod bearings, but we have to disassemble it further to see the rest of the damage, but so far so good. Now the cylinder head's finally ready to go to the machine shop to get resurfaced, although there are still a few final parts left to remove first. And while I'm at it, I also used the double nut method to remove the remaining studs from the cylinder head. Alright, with the cylinder head gone, we now want to put the engine on the engine stand to remove the rest of the parts. But before we can do that, we got to remove the gearbox. And so Pascal lifts the engine slightly again, using a piece of wood underneath it so we can get a bit more room to work. And with that done, it's finally time to remove the starter motor and the remaining bolts holding the gearbox onto the engine. Luckily, the bolts on the underside had already been removed earlier, so this actually ends up being a pretty quick job. Yeah, you got it.
There it is.
Well, that's nice.
Yeah. Oh, it's dirty.
Yeah, everything's dirty.
There it is.
But we're still not quite ready to put the engine on the stand yet, cause the clutch still has to come off first. We'll definitely be needing a new one, but we're going to install a new one anyway, so.
Wow, this is also bad.
Yeah. And now it is time to mount the engine onto the engine stand, which is going to make working on it a whole lot more comfortable from this point on. Normally, whenever we work on a different engine, we somehow always spend way too much time trying to adjust the stand to make everything fit properly. But since this is basically a Volvo engine in disguise, this one actually fits perfectly right away for once.
Yeah.
And while the inside of the engine is definitely our main priority, some of the parts on the outside clearly need a little attention too.
So, something of a bit, yeah, oxidized coolant there.
At this point, the rest of the process is pretty straightforward. Since we want to fully strip down the engine, we now continue by removing all the remaining parts still attached to the short block. And even though we're very curious to finally see what's going on inside the engine, we still want to take everything apart properly instead of rushing straight to the internals. Even though some of these parts, like the crankshaft pulley, were pretty annoying to remove. Now on to the final step before we can finally reach the conrod bearings, and that is to remove the oil sump, which luckily is only attached with 4 bolts. Well, I think it's the moment we've been waiting for all this time, because we're going to see the conrod bearings. Yeah. Finally. I already know they're bad, but I want to see them.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yep.
So I know I'm using a torque wrench to undo the bolts, but this is the one, because it's a bit longer, I use for that kind of thing. And this is the good one.
Yeah, that's broken.
Yeah, so just...
No hate, please.
Just to be clear.
And even though we already know this engine's broken, this still feels like the really scary part. What exactly are we about to find once we open it up?
How does yours look?
Well, really bad.
Oh.
I think this is definitely a problem.
Yeah, it's really kaput.
Yeah, well, that happens when you got no oil.
So...
I've never seen them this bad before, I think. Well, that's nice, because we're going to rebuild it with new ones. And that will be a whole lot of an upgrade. But this is bad.
Yeah, this is real bad.
And even though the conrods will be getting new bolts during reassembly, it is still important to keep every conrod together with its matching end cap. So for now, I bolt them back together and use zip ties to mark the piston numbers as well. One piston down, 4 more to go. And somehow that first bearing doesn't even turn out to be the worst one. Cause looking at the condition of these bearings, it is pretty clear this engine had a very rough final chapter. That's sick. Well, he didn't lie about the worn conrod bearings, because these are bad.
Yeah, this is typically what you get if you see an oil pressure light. You immediately turn off your engine, then you get this.
Yeah, yeah.
I think so.
That's not what happened, but
no, but
something happened, and there pretty much destroyed.
Yeah.
Well, conrod bearings are definitely worn, and they're worn so badly that we'll be needing a new crankshaft too. Now that the engine's completely apart, we finally have the full picture. But knowing what's wrong is one thing, figuring out how to fix it is a whole different story. So the next step will be to rebuild this thing. So if you want to see how this turns out, make sure you're subscribed. And for now, thank you so much for watching and see you in the next one. Bye!